non-essentialist, sustainable, and economically viable alternatives to the mainstream explanations of crop production started to emerge. Non-pesticidal management, biological and genetic diversity, sustainable practices, biosafety are some of the key notions that gain ground in the discourse on alternatives in crop science. So serious questioning of the assumptions of mainstream crop science like soil, plant, and pathogens led to alternative paradigms. For example, system of rice intensification. It's popularly known as SRI or SRI cultivation. As an approach of rice cultivation emerged in the precincts of civil society organizations and offers alternative to the Green Revolution-based seed irrigation fertilizer intensive cultivation. What is the politics of agriculture knowledge? Modern science evolved certain standard practices which are privileged over farmers' practices. The ideological basis of modern science justified the best management practices suggested by the scientific community over farmers' conventional cumulative wisdom. Thus, the diffusion of innovation literature categorizes farmers on an adoption innovation continuum from innovators to laggards. The politics of knowledge took other form, in which nation states tried to use crop science to strive for food self-sufficiency. In scientization of politics, political problems are seen as technical ones, and modern science is seen as a means to fix political problems. So the ideological base of modern agricultural science, that is eradication of hunger with the help of science, however, eventually transformed science as a means to pursue political and economic ends. The lineage of technological rationality translating into political rationality is long, but we need to ask why a technical reason was found to be compelling when it could have been challenged, and what counts as technical superiority in specific circumstances. This is coming from an STS scholar and questioning the very nature of science. So scientists, STS is Science, Technology and Society Scholarship. So scientists working in agriculture research institutes recognize the role of external factors influencing the research agenda. These factors are not just located within the body of scientific knowledge. Political and economic interests influence agricultural research across countries. Jennings observes that international agricultural research used science as a vehicle for politics. Studies of science and technology policy presuppose a pivotal role for sovereign nation states in generation and advancement of new knowledge. However, even though transnational states continue to claim the same formal political sovereignty over decisions related to national economy and growth as enjoyed by the classic nation states, their actual autonomy in policy making and national regulation has been severely eroded by the structures of global economy. So in this critical examination, the role of international agriculture research institutions comes under scanner. The international agriculture research institutes, which claim to have the stated goal of providing sufficient food to feed the world's hungry populations, found to be political in nature, for they set the agenda for research in less developed countries. This again becomes problematic from sociological point of view. Then coming to the emerging context of agriculture in India. Agriculture in India is undergoing radical changes in the post-liberalization era owing to multiple factors. With the launching of economic reforms based on neoliberal agenda, crop cultivation became knowledge-intensive, commercialized, competitive, and globalized. The change is also witnessed in the form of rapid decline of role of state in agriculture extension and other services to the farming community. Structurally, today's agriculture is dominated by small and marginal farmers operating small land holdings. So there are nearly about 160 million operational holdings, which with average size of operational holding of 1.08 hectares. So there is a constant rise in marginal small holdings and decline in the large holdings since 1970. Sociologically speaking, these farmers that I'm referring to, small and marginal farmers, these farmers' disposition towards agricultural technologies, agricultural information, and most importantly towards state is different from that of upper caste, large farmers who were the blue-eyed boys of Green Revolution period, who often referred to as progressive farmers. These sections of farmers present characteristics which cannot be explained in terms of classical diffusion of innovations approach. As these small and marginal farmers belong to lower strata in society, their social, cultural, and economic capital is poor when compared to large farmers of the upper social strata. Vasavi, an eminent scholar who works in this area, maintains that these sections of farmers are caught by the web of risks, such as low risk taking ability, lack of required technical knowledge, lack of access to working capital and marketing networks, low investment, low productivity, weak market orientation in the present day agriculture. So, as we see that we are talking in terms of Green Revolution 2, after the entry of liberalized economy, and also when we review the Green Revolution phase, so state is talking in terms of second Green Revolution, wherein it is luring all sections of farmers, irrespective of size of land holdings and irrigation sources. Also, the extension of Green Revolution technology to less endowed, resource-poor regions exposes these farmers to the risks of technology, governance, and market. In the absence of state, at the time of such expansion into these fragile regions and to the less privileged farmers could spell great damage to the social fabric. Beyond the economic gains and near sufficiency in food grain production, the issue of farm security is assuming critical importance. It is argued that the outcomes from the institutions of crop science in India are increasingly becoming irrelevant in the small and marginal farmer context. It is alleged that these scientific outcomes are biased towards large upper caste farmers and more significantly oriented to benefit market forces rather than small and marginal farmers. Thus, in the hope of making a livelihood, we see small and marginal farmers moving from sustainable practices to commercial, capital-intensive cultivation. So what is the statement of my research problem? Critical examination of scientific practices in agricultural sciences and the institutional priorities involved in agriculture research has been attempted by social scientists before. However, this attempt was largely from a technological deterministic perspective. That means these attempts were essentially aimed at understanding the implications of the scientific advances in agriculture on society. Attempts at problematizing the scientific practices, methodologies, priorities, assumptions of crop sciences per se have been missing. Social science discourse in agriculture predominantly revolves around social, structural, and economic aspects of agrarian relations, suspending the critical scrutiny of science of agriculture, assuming crop science to be esoteric, equitable, democratic, and beyond social scientists' gaze. So this statement is the backbone of my entire idea or entire work. On the other hand, scientific community engaged in crop science research view crop production as asocial, treating it in isolation from agency at the crop production level. So there is in the words of Edgar Gilsell, who provided an account of how science was born, and who suggested that the social barrier between the two components of scientific method broke down and the methods of superior craftsmen were adopted by academically trained scholars. Real science was born. So this is a classical work wherein he explains how science grew. So wherein he talks about craftsmanship entering into academia or the universities, wherein scientists looked at the principles or thumb rules and then advanced them into engineering principles. So using that analogy, practice of crop science, crop production evolved over centuries through certain principles and practices based on empirical testing and standardization. There is a dearth of research on these presumably separate worlds of social and natural sciences to present a coherent perspective on the contemporary agriculture research in India. The present research attempts at delineating the practices, procedures in crop sciences with regard to research. And constructivist account helps us to understand the values, norms, standards which evolve into cultural outcomes and have a bearing on the practices of scientific community within the establishments of agricultural research in the country. So the objectives of my study were this statement: modernity entails scientific rationality that offers empiricist explanations of worldly phenomena, including crop production. Situated in rational approach, crop sciences focus primarily on productivity, and attempts made by the researchers in crop sciences in that direction have been met with results that range from progressive to retrogressive. Moving beyond the linear model of modern science paradigm, alternatives to standard crop production have started to emerge outside the scientific realm. That is NGOs, basically NGOs, civil society organizations. For example, SRI, right, is not evolved by a scientist, and non-pesticidal management is another example. Organic farming is another example. So a critical understanding of the perceptions of the scientists working in the institutions of crop science is the need of the hour when the global agriculture is going to be controlled by few transnational corporations who are equipped with ideology, policy, and proprietary rights. So the present study thus aims at bringing out the constraints within the institutional system which obfuscate the initiatives to pursue research for public good outside the normative framework, quote unquote. It aims at understanding the perceptions of agricultural scientists on the issues related to research, the contemporary status of agriculture in the country, and particularly on the research outcomes as perceived by farmers. So I went about collecting data from scientists located across different universities in the country. For example, Tamil Nadu Agriculture University, Coimbatore, and Madurai, and in Telangana, Andhra Pradesh. Then I went to Pant University, then Punjab Agriculture University, Ludhiana, then Zorhat. So quite a range of agriculture universities were visited, and in all I interacted with about 190 scientists. I'm actually unable to present all this data here for lack of time, but I will be presenting the gist of what the outcome of my research is. So I have evolved a questionnaire with several parameters or several aspects of agriculture, and as listed out or as read out just now, my primary concern was how and why scientists are unable to meet the needs of small and marginal farmers, and what are their perceptions about the contemporary agriculture research in India, and how do they see these alternatives that are emerging from outside, and in all, what is the culture of research in crop science institutions across the country. So the aim of the study was to understand the extent to which agricultural science is responsive to the fast-paced developments occurring in the larger social milieu. If it is responsive, how the issues are translated into research agendas of the scientists in the state agriculture institutions. Based on these objectives, the study was undertaken to understand what scientists perceive about crop science research vis-a-vis the emerging social reality in the country. So the study ascertained the opinions of scientists on the objectives scientists keep in mind. This is one of the parameters of study, that is perceptions of scientists on crop science research in India as such. So how do they look at crop science research? So the question was like, how do they perceive or what do they keep in mind, or what guides them in formulating the research problem? The perception of scientists towards the objectives of their research was measured through the ranking they gave for a set of objectives, ranging from productivity to technology generation. Among these objectives, problem solving emerged as the highest ranking objective, followed by productivity. It is important to note that for a significant number of respondents, that's about 46%, publication of papers through research is not a preferred objective. Agricultural science emerged as a discipline of its own, attracting young to pursue it as a career. The standards of evaluation of performance, typical to that of any academic science, mandate scientists in agriculture institutions to fulfill the minimum criteria for promotion to a higher level. So this was evident very clearly in my interactions with them, because for the young generation, career become the most important objective, and thus publication, although they only 46% observed that publication of papers is not their preferred objective, but in their conversations, it came out very clearly that there is an anxiety among them to publish papers, and thus other aspects like helping improving farm income at the small and marginal farmers level is or it figures somewhere as third or fourth objective. Although scientists ranked publications as the not so important objective kept in mind while formulating the research proposal, the importance of publications came out in the informal conversations with the researcher. It may be mentioned that during their interaction with the researcher, a significant number of scientists expressed their reservations about the standards of performance evaluation presently followed by the agricultural institutions. The bone of contention is that the present evaluation criteria privilege publications over extension or problem-solving work of the scientists. Being an applied science and influenced by the problems farmers face, many a times scientists choose to work on a problem that provides immediate answers to some challenges of the farmers. Same is the case with transfer of technology. However, such works are not given due weightage in the evaluation. In fact, this trend indicates the tendency of agricultural sciences, the discipline that has to work with farmers and for farmers, moving away from field to lab. Some suggest that the new generation of scientists recruited are not from agricultural families, which was the case about 2 decades back, and would like to seek research questions that can lead to publications. Moreover, the new recruits are more interested in publications for career growth rather than problem solving. This is a kind of an important shift that occurred in agriculture universities from Green Revolution period to now. So the Green Revolution period witnessed entry of agricultural scientists coming from farm background. But now the new generation are basically majority of them are from urban middle class who have no clue of farming at all. And also the policy of agriculture institutions in or guidelines followed in career advancement scheme of agricultural research institutes, which consider only publications and nothing else. Thus, fieldwork and solving field level problems or solving the problems of farmers are not counted in career advancement scheme. The social context of cultivation in India is undergoing change. A large number of farmers operate small holdings. They belong to the lower strata of society. The biggest challenge before the state, policymakers, crop and social scientists is how to make the small holdings sustainable for socially and economically poor farmers like Dalits, tribes, and women. Assumption of trickle-down effect, scale neutrality of agricultural technologies are debunked. This has been widely reported and researched, and it actually didn't happen. Even if the trickle-down happened, it happened in negative. So widespread agrarian distress, increasing vulnerability of these sections of farmers is the present day reality. Modern science proceeds with objective understanding of the phenomena. Crop science research assumes that the methods of its science place it above subjective interpretations of reality. However, Given the fact that farming or cultivation and the output in the form of yield and productivity are subjective phenomena influenced by social, economic, and political factors of cultivation, scientists must formulate the objectives accordingly. So the problem actually comes from the notion of modern science that crop production is asocial, but it is influenced. Crop production is highly subjective and influenced by the location of the farm. If the farm is in the upper caste progressive farmer, then the productivity, we can say, that is more when compared to a farming system with within the realms of a small and marginal farmer belonging to a lower strata or a Dalit farmer, to be precise. In the emerging reality of Dalits, tribes, and women farmers, the objectives of research must rise above these linear methods of research. In an attempt to understand the perceptions of the scientists, they were asked whether they considered the social differentiation of farm holdings as an essential part of the research process. A majority of the respondents don't consider it as relevant at all. Right? Only about 42% believe that social differentiation along caste and gender lines is relevant in the formulation of research problem. This actually reaction to a formal interview schedule, but in their conversations, it came out very clearly that they never consider caste as a factor influencing their research objectives and methodologies. It was also attempted to know what extent structural differentiation. So this is again along the lines of land holding, which is categorized into marginal, small, medium, semi-medium, and large farmers influences the formulation of research problem. So to this, about 46% found that consideration of structural differentiation in the formulation of research problem is most relevant. On the consideration of structural differentiation in conducting field demonstrations, about 52% of the respondents observed that it is most relevant. The fact is that agricultural scientists are aware of the structural differentiation in terms of class categories or land holding or land size in terms of small, marginal, and big farmers. But they're not aware, rather, it is not kind of an established practice to consider caste or social differentiation when they formulate the research problem. On the issue of social and structural differentiation being considered by the scientists in the formulation of research problem, data suggests that structural differentiation is considered more than social differentiation. The reason may be due to the very strong bearing of agricultural economics on the agricultural sciences. Agriculture economists have been working with class categories since a long time, and hence land holding has become an essential category in research. Will it become an acceptable category for research in agricultural sciences if farmers are categorized on the basis of caste? This may be possible with the active engagement of sociologists along with agriculture extension specialists in the departments of agricultural science. The emphasis on such perspective is not aimed at bringing political orientation to research, but to highlight the fact that social and cultural aspects of farmers do influence their access to knowledge, disposition to knowledge, new technologies, and orientation to put the technologies to better use. It may be mentioned here that a small or marginal farmer belonging to upper caste may become the natural choice of agricultural researchers for their various kinds of interaction rather than Dalit farmer. This was actually noticed in the field. Agricultural scientists conduct field trials. So of late, post-90s, there is a shift in the approach of the agricultural scientists as well, wherein they are actually mandated to conduct these field trials at different levels, that is, small and marginal farmer level, medium farmer, and progressive farmer level. But the disposition of a Dalit farmer towards new technologies or accessing new knowledge or accessing information on new farm practices is completely different from that of a small and marginal farmer belonging to an upper caste strata. So academic science is largely state funded in India. Agricultural science is no exception to this. Science seeking solutions to the problems faced by farmers has been the top priority of the state in terms of funding. During the Green Revolution phase, the state funding to research in agricultural sciences was the only source. However, over a period with changes in the macroeconomic structure in the country and changes in the trade and commerce worldwide, the entry of private corporate institutions into Indian agriculture is being witnessed. Since then, research in agriculture began to receive funding from both national and international and public-private resources as well. So this section is on funding, source of funding for research. So a significant number, that's about 34% of the respondents noted that they didn't receive funding of their choice of research because the research problem was not fitting into the institution's mandate. Similarly, about 53% agreed to the statement that they did not receive funding of their choice because the research topic doesn't suit the mandate of the funding agency. So whether it is state or private funding agency. So this particular finding, these findings refer to the normative structure which has set in the research proposal stage as well as fund-seeking efforts by the scientists. So those proposals which fit into the mandate of the institute as well as the funding agency receive grants for the research. Thus, we can say that about 34% have noted that they didn't receive funding of their choice. So even if the scientists want to conduct a research that's of more relevant to small and marginal farmers, they do not receive because either the mandate of the institution is different or the funding agency's mandate is different. Although only 13% of the respondents who stated that they had a research problem that doesn't fit the institution's mandate, who have formally accepted, but in private, majority of them accepted that they cannot get funding of their funding for the research problem of their choice. Also, about 21 scientists out of 38 who responded to the statement that incompatible with the priorities of the institute as the reason for non-suitability of research problem agreed with the statement. This suggests that funding for research project is approved for those which are identified for research by the institute in the name of thrust areas, which fit into the mandate of the institution and its priorities, and also which fit into the funding agency's mandate. It is important to note that there are scientists who wish to work in the areas beyond the institution's mandate and which don't fit into the institution's priorities, and their project proposals are not approved for funding. This highlights the normative structure of research funding process in agricultural science research institutions. So crop science research is standardized in terms of methods used. Hence, research proposals going beyond the standard methods are denied funding. This was actually asked in terms of, in the light of research that is going outside the agricultural science institutes on like SRI, organic farming, and non-pesticidal management. So when it was asked, this was reported by a significant number of respondents who stated that there is a general tendency of denial of funding if the research problem and the methods adopted don't follow the established standards. Also, about 27% respondents agreed to the statement that funding was not received because the outcomes of the research are not visible or measurable using the positivist methods of research. This is an important outcome of my research. So this was also expressed by scientists who are working on issues like system of rice intensification, organic farming, etc. in their personal interviews. A scientist working on organic farming observed that it was difficult for me to show the immediate results of organic farming, say in one season, as the beneficial impacts are felt over successive seasons. Hence, the board used to put hurdles on research funding. I had to work hard to convince them. So what happens in organic farming is that if you don't use fertilizers, the yields will be low in the first two, at least three crop cycles, by which time the soil actually replenishes or rejuvenates with organic content. And in the successive crop cycles, even though farmers apply less fertilizers, chemical fertilizers, the yields are on a scale of match with the fertilizer used crops. So, but the linear mode of evaluation doesn't consider these realities. Research in crop sciences requires this is about perceptions of scientists on interaction with farmers. Constant interaction with farmers. In the early phase of Green Revolution, agricultural scientists brought problems of farmers from the field and worked extensively to provide solutions. The nature and intensity of interaction of scientists with farmers during the Green Revolution phase was exemplary. Hence, it may be said that agriculture research contributed immensely to the nation's goal. However, over a period, there appears to be a growing gap between scientists and farmers. Although in the formal interview, the scientists said that they maintain interaction with farmers, but it was observed that the interaction was limited to interacting with farmers when they come for Kisan Melas or any meetings organized by the university. Otherwise, the research funding has become so difficult to maintain vehicles to go to villages constantly, observe and guide during the crop seasons. Then about reflections on contemporary agriculture in the country. The study attempted to understand the perceptions of crop scientists on the emerging agrarian reality. And it finds that scientists prioritize productivity increasing research outcomes and sustainable research outcomes as the most relevant for agricultural science research today. State has been instrumental in bringing success during the Green Revolution phase. However, owing to changes in the wider context, state's role in agriculture appears to be declining. Reflecting on this, scientists favor an active role of state in agriculture today. With regard to the role of private players in agriculture, about 41% of the respondents favor the participation of private players in agriculture in the country. Majority scientists also agree that the state institutions are lagging behind private research institutions in the country. At the same time, they suggest not to leave agriculture to the private market forces. As regards the perception of scientists on the problems plaguing agriculture today, study finds that a majority of the respondents view lack of remunerative prices for farm products as the most important problem faced by farmers, followed by problems related to agriculture markets, availability, quality and cost of agriculture inputs, and depleting water resources. Responding to the question on the important contributions of state agriculture research institutions in the last 10 years, majority of the respondents suggested development of new high-yielding, disease-resistant, improved varieties of seeds as the most important contributions. This is followed by technology transfer and the contributions in the field of integrated pest management. Reflecting on the important contributions of private agricultural science research in the country, majority of the scientists observed that improved high-yielding pest and disease-resistant seed varieties as the most important contribution. This is followed by advancements in molecular biology leading to development of new transgenic varieties like variety seeds like BT cotton and development of new pesticide formulations using newer molecules to control pest and diseases. Then coming to the perception of crop, I'm actually running through some of these findings. Perception of crop scientists on agrarian crisis in India. Study finds that scientists believe government failed to take technologies to farmers. They also believe that suicides are not related to agriculture problems, rather results from other factors like credit and market forces. The scientists view that farmers are not trained to use agricultural technologies. It's a kind of blame or throwing the blame. And it was also found that in the light of agrarian crisis in the country, which actually witnessed a large number of farmer suicides. I was actually curious to know from them whether was there any seminar or conference conducted on farmer suicides in any of these agricultural research institutes. And to my surprise, I found that not a single conference was held in all these agricultural institutions. And when I inquired for the reason, I got to know that they feel that it is not the failure of the crop science research, but it is the failure of the state to take these technologies to farmers. And again, some of the other findings, like the study finds that a majority of the respondent scientists view farmers' traditional knowledge is relevant to a great extent. I'm referring to farmers' traditional knowledge in addressing the problems of agriculture at the small and marginal farmers level. Similarly, a significant number of respondents, that's about 41%, believe that farmers' traditional knowledge is relevant to a great extent at the socially backward farmers level. And another important dimension of my research question was on perceptions on crop sciences and social sciences. It's a well-known fact that agricultural sciences in the country grew in strength since independence and diversified into different specializations, offering solutions to problems related to yields, efficiency, etc. When it comes to the application, adoption, and evaluation of technologies, social science component of agricultural science is claimed to have provided relevant support. Thus, the component on social aspects, including cultural and economic, are integral part of agricultural science curriculum. However, in the context of agrarian crisis, the social science specializations located in agricultural universities came under sharp criticism for their failure to provide necessary academic as well as research support to the core agricultural science specializations. The study finds that a majority of the respondents believe that their area of research require inputs from social sciences. At the same time, they also felt that inputs from social sciences are not satisfactory. Analyzing the reasons, majority of scientist respondents believe that social sciences are not well grounded in agriculture universities. A large majority of the respondents concur with the statement that social sciences enrich agriculture research. However, they are weakly placed in agriculture universities and institutes. The scientists find that social sciences do not offer a critical view. The crop scientists who responded to the survey believe that there is a great need for close collaboration between agricultural sciences and social sciences. Then culture of crop science research. I'm actually giving you excerpts, not going into details. A young scientist observes that for our career growth, it is important for us to focus on research projects which can get funding without much difficulty. There is also a feeling that from time to time, there is a shift in the popularity of research areas. Unfortunately, sometimes the popular research areas are pushed by the international agriculture research organizations and other agencies, and local issues seldom receive their attention. They also felt that scientists at the top are more convinced about a research area when it comes from international organizations than when it evolves from local contexts. Continuing the probing, when it was asked whether, for example, SRI, SRI, or organic farming would have greater acceptance for research funding had it been pushed by international agencies, the response was overwhelmingly affirmative. This surmises the fact that agricultural research in the country, in its pursuit of transnationalist agenda, has been oblivious to the emerging needs of the country. The study finds that despite limitations, some enthusiastic scientists worked on certain alternate knowledge claims like SRI. Such enthusiasm, in fact, led to considerable scientific scrutiny of SRI in India. However, each of their experience is a learning to know how the culture of science operates in scientific institutions. It was observed that extra scientific factors play a significant role in research in institutions of science. Persons at the top, quote unquote, and their specializations and interests of research, their convictions do matter in the research project initiations, approvals, and support for funding. A favorable person at the top, external funding, tie-up with renowned funding and or collaborative agency had been reported as factors which influenced the initial work of some scientists on SRI. They all claim that because of their personal conviction, they were enthused to try SRI. These scientists recall that their peer group was skeptical and often ridiculed such studies. They observed that SRI was hotly contested in the lobbies of their institutions, research seminars, funding board meetings, etc. However, over a period, the opposition to SRI weakened as the discussion on SRI became intense in journals. Publication of findings in reputed journals has been one of the key factors in changing the attitude of peer group towards SRI. Apart from this, as invitations from international and national conferences to share their findings started pouring, the opinion of peer group changed significantly. A retired scientist who pursued rigorous research on SRI contends that he went about giving doctoral research topics to his students on SRI, even when there was a strong opposition to SRI in the academic circles. He points out that pressures operate in a research institution, and it is important to withstand such pressures. He asserts that because he was convinced about the science of SRI, he could strongly argue for research on SRI. Later on, when he received huge funding from external sources, the credibility of research on SRI among the peer group members was established. In a way, it suggests that the acceptance of a research concept among peer group members is dependent upon the fellowships offered to students, funding from external sources, which in turn help in establishing the topic in agriculture research centers. However, the scientist felt that surely taking up research topics that raise critical questions at the dominant paradigm and still finding place in agriculture research institutions is nothing but inviting hurdles. And when I asked him, he said he could afford to do that because he was on the verge of retirement. I come to concluding part. So the findings of the study suggest that there appears to be a general agreement in scientific community cutting across disciplines vis-a-vis the concerns of farmers in the country. This is evident when the views are shared during the in-depth interviews and also presented in the survey analysis. However, there also appears to be certain epistemological issues along with structural factors which make it difficult for the scientists to pursue research on the alternate technologies. This is amply evident in the case study of SRI. Given the normative framework within which agricultural science research is carried out, any expectation of critical admission and also the pursuit of research in that direction will be unrealistic. It is therefore believed that there is a need for reflexivity in agriculture sciences. Based on the observations in the study, it may be said that agricultural scientific community is not always against pursuing research in the areas of interest to small and marginal farmers. However, it is admitted that the norms that govern research funding and priorities set by institutions often act as hurdles. For example, some scientists admit that certain research questions they have in mind, how relevant they may be, given the space and time, may not fit into the research mandates of the institutions. This raises the concerns on science becoming dogmatic. Openness, flexibility, freedom with accountability may be the need of the hour. The study reveals that there is a lack of institutional thrust to focus on the alternatives to mainstream models of knowledge generation in crop sciences. Empiricist, positivist methodologies dictate the standards of merit of practice, thus nullifying any innovation outside it. It is being felt that the institutional response to it should be democratic, liberal, constructivist, and inclusive. One final phase. Crop sciences view farmers as passive agents who readily adopt new knowledge, replacing old knowledge. Instead of testing the scientific basis of conventional knowledge, the institutions of science rubbished, ignored, and never bothered to integrate new knowledge with the historical basis of knowledge. The need for a new paradigm of socially responsive crop science research and revised assumptions on farm and farmer has become imperative. It is being increasingly realized that the institutions of crop science should consider the changing demographic profile of farmers, emerging alternative knowledge claims, concern over climate change, and contemporary agriculture context in the neoliberal state. Crop sciences could work towards democratic, liberal, constructivist, and inclusive knowledge forms, eschewing linear, positivistic methodologies to make agricultural science still relevant at the small and marginal holdings. Democratization of crop sciences is the need of the hour, for it promises to bring the concerns of vulnerable sections of farmers into the research agenda rather than market interests. Reconfiguration of research agendas, practices, and methodologies is possible when the crop sciences in India allies with farmer and farming communities. In the era of knowledge society, the only section that is knowledge disempowered is farming community of certain regions and farmers belonging to certain strata. Establishment of Agriculture Knowledge Commission with an aim to promoting localized plural knowledge forms could help in guiding the efforts of crop science endeavors to overcome the problems of agriculture in India today. So this is about this is about my paper and as well as my research, and I conclude here, and I welcome any observations, critical reflections on this. Professor Giri.
Thank you so much, Professor Raghav Reddy. It has been very enriching. So we look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Professor Reddy. It was very insightful session. And now I would like to invite, I can see one of our participants who is very important for us to give a kind of critical reflection. Dr. Rajiv Yadav is a director and of CBS Group of Institution. So Dr. Rajiv, over to you. Please share some of your thoughts.
Thank you very much, sir, for giving me the opportunity. It's a very nice talk to get the things by experience of our Indian culture and all the things what we have learned today. Thank you very much for being the part of this Zoom seminar. Thank you very much, sir.
So any other participant who wants to ask anything, please indicate me in the chat box. Meanwhile, I can invite Minti Pradhanji to share some of your thoughts.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. First, I'd like to thank Professor Reddy for very insightful and detailed presentation. Actually, what I wanted just to share in the last segment of this thing is just to share that one. So that is really all of our concern now, how to improve the crop production in the light of climate change, I mean, this climate change is a major environmental change that endangers the crop production, water resources, and economic stability, actually. So that is what he said, that a new policy is required for all that, if I'm not wrong. If you, sir, can put some more light on that, that is also fine. And I want to tell one more thing. Modern science actually replaced the community knowledge, as sir said. That is very true. With that, we strived for food sufficiency and the eradication of poverty. But how to, and sometimes we see this, the community knowledge is being ignored. Then how to keep the balance between these two? I mean, at a times, how to keep the community knowledge at place and as well as use the modern science not to harm the environment. That is one thing. And one more thing, just I want to share. I had recently in this January into some fireflies. Many of us were there. Even Anand Bhai was there. So there they were discussing the modern farming and organic farming and natural farming. Natural farming is a part of what you say, the natural way. I mean, there will be some. We should not use the herbicide also, like organic farming. We are telling that there is a share to any crop, that is a share to the birds, to the animals, to the worms, like as we cohabit with that earth, and we all it is not that only we are cultivating and we have to consume. It is like sharing and being together. So that is what I just wanted to share. And if sir can say these two things more, and thank you for the opportunity.
So, Professor Reddy.
Yeah, these are very important, and how scientific community reacts to the emerging situation is kind of primary concern to us, because given the mandate, given the normative structure of agricultural science research in the country, it is becoming a kind of contentious issue uh, for the institutions to provide grants to such research, as I have presented in the my paper, and also the funding agencies which actually do not uh, provide sufficient funding. For example, private research funding is only aimed at improving productivity, increasing productivity of seed and fertilizers, herbicides, etc. There it looks like a mismatch between the research institutions' mandate at the moment and the concerns of the farming community in particular and society in general, right? We know the reality of risks associated with chemical fertilizers and indiscriminate spraying of pesticides, right? One of important sociologists like Beck talked long time back about risk society. So we have not attained that stage yet. We are not yet aware of the risks associated with these practices, particularly with relation to agriculture and crop production vis-a-vis climate change. So it actually needs a kind of bold initiative which should come from within, from the research institutes and scientists as well. So it needs to be debated at length. My suggestion is actually to open up these agriculture research institutes to prominent social institutions, social science institutions in the country, engage with the social scientists, engage with the economists, engage with sociologists, anthropologists, and then frame the new methodologies for conducting such research. I'm also actually it presents an alarming situation for us when we hear about extending green revolution to northeastern regions, right? So what happens if, I think so far I'm given to understand that green revolution is not spread to northeast regions. So in that way, it is actually maintaining that old balance in nature. But what if this green revolution is extended to northeast in the most vigorous manner? So that's my concern as well.
Hello, may I so, sir, you tell us, how this suicide farmers can be prevented, whether who has to play the main role, the state, the councillor, or the research institutes, who should play the main role?
Yeah, it's a kind of collective crime by state, by agricultural research institutions as well. I dare to blame because we have not uh, we have not researched the consequence of extending green revolution to the green revolution to beyond the command areas. See, for example, in Telangana, Warangal was the hotbed. Warangal district was known for highest number of farmer suicides. So that the reason behind that was the extension of green revolution based cultivation practices into the region, which is actually semi-arid, depends on rainfall and irrigation by tube well or open well, right? It is not abundantly irrigated area, and farmers choosing commercial crops. So this actually resulted, and cultivation of cotton in green revolution way was kind of calling the real danger. and this has resulted. So it is it's actually easy to blame state. Everyone can do that. But my point is that to what extent the scientific community, particularly crop science research institutes, more precisely the social science components in agriculture universities, are reflexive. Why they have not alerted the mainstream science research in their institutes about the ill effects of extending the green revolution to these regions.
Thank you, sir. Randhir, you can take it forward.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate the insightful session by Professor Reddy. So, dear and respected friends, thank you so much for your kind participation. And we are also running out of time. So, keeping this in mind, so now we can offer a formal vote of thanks to our respected resource person. So, may I invite Minti Pradhanji to kindly offer a vote of thanks to our respected.
Thank you, Randhir. I, Minati Pradhan, on behalf of Shraddha Sahachakra and Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming, would like to thank our chief speaker, Professor C. Raghavan Reddy, for his very detailed and insightful presentation. Thank you, sir, for enlightening us. So I would like to thank our moderator, Professor Anant Kumar Giri, for making us learn every week these different through different sessions and different things. Thank you, Anant. I would like to thank Dr. Rajiv Yadav for his participation in our webinar. Thank you, sir, for being present and actively participating. I would like to thank all the participants in our Zoom platform and the Facebook platform for joining us and making our webinar a big success. At the last, not the least, I would like to thank our convener Randhir Kumar Gautam for planning, executing, and doing all these things. What week after week, it is not an easy thing. I always appreciate him. Thank you, Randhir. And please pardon me if I've forgotten anybody's name. And thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.